Hello there. Welcome to Forum Focus. I'm Wyatt Sharp. It's good to have you with us as we embark on another 4 years under President Donald Trump. The global stage is set for significant shifts, from the intensification of the U.S.-China trade wars to a redefined approach to NATO and the Middle East. The implications of Trump's geopolitical strategies will likely resonate potentially worldwide, or maybe there are going to be more questions, as we've certainly seen over the course of the past little while. Tonight, we'll delve into what these changes mean for global politics and stability. And joining us now to unpack it all is former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh. Joe, always a pleasure to have you with us.
Wyatt, it's so good to be with you, my friend.
You as well. Let's just perhaps start out first with, will Donald Trump end up deciding against his decision to impose tariffs on countries like Canada and Mexico? He seems, at least at this point, pretty inconsistent. In fact, he was willing to withdraw tariffs from Mexico before he was willing to do so for Canada.
It's hard to tell, Wyatt, because here's a couple things we know. Trump really doesn't have an ideology or a philosophy, but he's always loved the notion of tariffs. And you
Yeah.
combine that with the fact that so much of what Trump does is just performative.
Mm.
He's a bully, so he tries to bully our neighbors and friends like Mexico and Canada. So I think the world knows that about Trump. And I think the world needs to stand up to him. I think generally he's going to use these tariffs as a tool to try to bully our friends.
And how might other world leaders come to perceive him? We've certainly seen recently a lot of people, whether it be Justin Trudeau, the Mexican president, even Justin Trudeau recently was in France meeting with Emmanuel Macron. And it seems it's just all of these world leaders right now are really trying to go against him, combat some of the rhetoric that he's presenting. And then in addition to that, polls in Canada right now show that we're on track to have Pierre Poilievre as our next prime minister, which, although ideologically he is closely aligned with Donald Trump, he does still take kind of a Canada first approach in the same way it often seems Trump likes to say he's taking an America first approach.
Well, yes, and your new guy up there, Wyatt, does have an ideology, and he understands that tariffs are bad. And
Hmm.
he also understands that Canada is not going to be America's 51st state. Look, world leaders, I think, get it this time. I think deep down they know Trump's an idiot. And the first time around, they tried to coddle him and flatter him. That generally works because Trump loves to be flattered. But this is a much more dangerous Donald Trump on the world stage. And I don't think our friends and allies, world leaders, can do that anymore. I think they have to stand up with him and be firm and tough with him. I think Trump will respond to that.
And I mean, I certainly take some of the comments that you're making, but obviously in the last election, Donald Trump was successful with even larger margins than he was in 2016, winning by more than Joe Biden won in 2020. Does that perhaps suggest that Americans are comfortable with some of the geopolitical comments he's making, not just about Canada, but also about places like Greenland, the Panama Canal, recently talking about wanting to buy Gaza, etc.?
I guarantee you, Wyatt, there is not one American voter who voted for Donald Trump because they wanted America to buy Greenland or buy Gaza or take back the Panama Canal.
So
I
then what's his
guarantee.
reasoning behind saying that if he knows it's not going to resonate with the voters?
Well, couple things. And again, the world needs to know this. What is Trump? He's an autocrat. He's a dictator. On the world stage, Wyatt, who does Trump admire? He admires Putin. He admires Xi. He admires dictators and autocrats. Remember what Trump's very first reaction to Putin when Putin invaded Ukraine? Trump called it a genius move. Trump loves the fact that autocrats can just take things. I think that's going to form a lot of what he wants to do this second term. I think it's craziness. I think it's bad. And the world needs to stand up to it and not just laugh at it this time around.
All right, and very quickly, in about 20 seconds or so, what do you make of Donald Trump, though, saying that he is being embraced by people like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, because he is taking the same country-first approach that they are? Obviously, that's his rhetoric, not mine.
He's being embraced by Putin and the rest because he will do what they want him to do. He is a puppet of Putin's. He'll do whatever Xi and all these other dictators around the world want him to do. They know how to manipulate him. That's why they want him in the White House.
All right, we will leave it there. Former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh, thank you as always.
Thanks, Wyatt.
All right, we are going to take a quick break. When we return, former Republican presidential candidate Steve Laffey, who ran against Donald Trump, is going to join us to unpack it all. Stay with us. Welcome back to Forum Focus. I'm Wyatt Sharp. We are continuing our conversation on Trump's geopolitical impact, and joining us to discuss it all is Steve Laffey, someone who knows Trump well because he ran against him in the 2024 presidential primary. He's also the former mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island. Steve, very good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Wyatt. Great show, and I am eager to tell you what is all wrong about the world with Donald Trump.
So, Steve, I know you're a finance guy. I want to ask you about some of these tariffs and some of the other just generic geopolitical comments he's been making recently. Does some of the comments that he's making about, again, things like tariffs make economic sense? A lot of people, both in Canada, the United States, economists, are saying that it would increase the cost of living for the average American family by more than $900. Are you in support of his comments on these tariffs?
Only the tariffs on communist China that I've talked about publicly since 2005, because they're dumping steel. They're building up a military to destroy America as a stated goal. But with Canada specifically, it is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. First of all, Donald Trump doesn't have a consistent policy about this. He signed the new NAFTA as the last time he was president. Now he's going after our greatest ally and our own companies because he tries 25% tariffs on everything. Then he backs off even though nothing happened. But the ones on steel and aluminum make no sense at all because, folks, America is the world superpower. Canada is an independent country and our closest ally, along with the UK, Japan, Australia. We have to figure out where all the steel, the aluminum, things we need are made strategically. And if we need some more in America, let's get it. But we're always going to be able to get aluminum from our friends in Canada. This is dumb. Not only will it increase costs to consumers in America, but I only hope that Canada figures out how to stop Donald Trump because Justin Trudeau did not figure it out by visiting him and kowtowed to him. It cost him his job, basically, right? What you need to do with Donald Trump is ignore him and double down on everything he does. So the people in Canada running the country need to say tomorrow morning, 50% tariffs on everything exiting our country to America and say nothing more. Because guess what? In 3 months, there won't be any cars in America to buy.
And those are and those are certainly some strong comments that you're making. And he has a lot of his own reasoning for doing this. I mean, he's saying it's because of fentanyl, because of the amount that's coming into the United States. If you talk to Canadian officials, they always now are citing the various statistics. They're talking about how it's more than 40,000 pounds coming in to the United States from the Mexican border, and it's only 50 pounds coming in from the Canadian border. That's only what's been reported. Of course, there is likely a lot more. But is there any way from your perspective that more Republicans will start to turn and speak out against him, specifically on tariffs? I mean, you hear a lot of people come, they say bad things about him, about his personality, about his character. But from an economic perspective, I talked to one Republican congressman just a little while ago who said that he is thinking a lot of Republican congresspeople within the House of Representatives will start to speak out against him because they're uncomfortable with the direction it will take the country.
I hope they do. He yields a lot of power over our country elects people every 2 years for the House of Representatives. Senators are more independent. So he put a lot of clout on people who are scared. But here's the thing. It's time to stop being scared because a lot of this stuff is complete nonsense. It makes no sense. And I feel bad for our friends in Canada. We're allies. Does Trump have a point, by the way, at NATO when everybody should be up to 3% and probably 5% given the threats around the world? He does. But there's a way to do that. It's not talking about fentanyl, which is nearly non-existent coming in from Canada. By the way, what are you going to do about it anyway? Anybody ever take a look at the border going across? How would you stop it anyway, folks? Because if we don't stop the demand of people taking fentanyl in America, it's going to come in through somewhere. So a lot of this stuff is non-existent, but I do think that his back and forth, he will lose the impetus of power. And eventually, I think within 6 months, become the emperor with no clothes on these issues. And people will turn against him because they'll see that they're going to lose the majority of Republicans in the House next year anyway. And so they will turn on him, but not yet.
And Steve, very quickly, we only have about 20 seconds left here, but do you think it's time for the United States or Canada to look beyond each other as the biggest trading partner? Canada was the biggest trading partner with the US for a long time. It just fell into second. Is that a sign that maybe we need to diversify the trade market?
I hope not. Canada's a great ally. You have wonderful oil and gas. I know we got a problem with the Quebec people with their farmers. We always have specific issues, but Canada and the US are great allies. Our borders are shared. We have an ocean on each side. We have to stick together and overcome Trump on this.
All right, we do have to leave it there. Steve Laffey, thank you so much.
God bless. Great to be with you.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's dive into the politics of what the Trump trade war could mean. Joining us to do just that is Sharon Carr. She served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Bill Morneau and is a partner at Sovereign Advisory. Sharon, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Hey, Wyatt.
So let's just begin. What is Canada likely to do to respond from a political standpoint, given that right now, we're on the verge of an election campaign? The response of Pierre Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau is likely to be quite different.
Well, yeah, I think you've seen so far how the government has handled it. We have this 30-day reprieve, which is going to quickly come to an end. But we also heard President Donald Trump come out on the weekend to say he was going to be putting in 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel. So I think in terms of how the government is going to handle it, right now, the government is handling it I would say, in the best way they can, which is to react based on the scenario at hand. What a lot of people need to remember is that someone like Donald Trump is not a normal politician. He is somebody who reacts and does stuff based on how he feels that day. So how they're going to respond to the tariffs might be very different tomorrow than it was yesterday. And the same goes with steel. They have to have a bit of an idea of who's impacted and how they're impacted. So I would say we should wait and see, because I don't actually think they know what they're going to do just yet.
And obviously, politically speaking, right now, the Liberals are also in the midst of their leadership race, and you're hearing kind of from different platforms of the various candidates how they would address it. What would a Mark Carney-style approach, of course, former governor of the Bank of Canada, who by all accounts right now is likely the front runner in this race, how would his approach differ from that of Justin Trudeau or even Pierre Poilievre, who is likely to now run against in the upcoming election?
I think there's a bit of a difference in how each candidate would handle it. So, for example, we've seen Mark Carney. He is, I would say, a seasoned, we can say, diplomat to a certain extent. He was a two-time bank governor. He knows how to handle some of these challenging situations. He was around in the UK during Brexit. But that being said, like I've said before, Donald Trump is not your typical normal politician. You have to adapt to reacting to him the way that he would feed off of. Whereas Chrystia Freeland, for example, has made her campaign slogan, "Trump doesn't like me," essentially. And we know that from the first time around. So I think that the positions of how they would handle it would be very different. I would be interested to see how Pierre Poilievre would handle it, because he's kind of hit back a little bit, and he's also a strong personality. But I think they also realize that when you're dealing with someone like Trump for the next 4 years, who basically is holding all the cards globally for everyone, you have to use a level of diplomacy, but also you have to be strategic with him. So everyone's going to do it a bit different. I think we'll have to wait and see how they really go for it.
And you're hearing Pierre Poilievre now use kind of the same Canada First rhetoric that Donald Trump was using with respect to America First. Does that perhaps signal, an approach that he's going to be taking that will mirror that of Donald Trump to not just this trade war, but also as we're heading into an election here in a few months?
I think it is very strategic in how he did that. Now, the difference here is, though, we have to remember that the economies of scale are very different. So as much as we want to say Canada first, we do rely on the U.S. for a lot. And as a result of this back and forth between Canada and the U.S. and these tariffs and counter tariffs, we've had this sudden resurgence of Canadian pride and mobilizing our own goods and services, whether it's our supply chain, whether it's pipelines, whether it's interprovincial trade barriers. And all that's great. but it doesn't happen overnight. So they're still going to be very heavily reliant on the US. And as the US is heavily reliant on us for a while, but the Canada First approach, I think he is tapping into a bit more now because he did see that there was a level of solidarity that came up from Trump's attacks on Canada. And I think the left, the right, the center, everyone came together because there is that pride in being Canadian.
And obviously, not just the federal election, but the provincial election as well that we're in right now here in Ontario. It was called in large part, Doug Ford said, because of an effort to try and protect Ontario as his campaign slogan. But the Liberals and the NDP in the province have really been kind of destined on making both healthcare, education the main priority of the campaign. And that's likely to kind of take shape and kind of shape the federal election as well. Would a conservative or liberal government, from your perspective, be more strong in combating the tariffs from Trump? And which one would he be more afraid of?
Well, I think that regardless of who it is, we have to come back to this Team Canada effort. It's not helpful for everyone to have their own approach and their own, I would say, position on how they're going to do it. Now, Doug Ford has been an excellent Captain Canada. He's been down in DC and he's been advocating. And tariffs are really important, but what's also important is things that Ontarians care about: healthcare. A lot of people can't get family doctors. Transit can be an issue. There are domestic issues that people care about. And I think Doug Ford has the upper hand because he has been front and center in front of the American audience, whereas it would be odd for someone like Merritt Stiles or Bonnie Crombie to do that because they're not in power to do it. So I think we're going to have to kind of see how that goes.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sharon Carr, thank you. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Our final guest today is NDP strategist Kim Wright. Kim, thanks so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure.
I wanted to have you on after seeing specifically some of the sharp comments made by Jagmeet Singh on CNN. And actually, one of my friends, colleagues who's a booker at CNN was asking me the other day for suggestions on people in Canada to interview. And I suggested Jagmeet Singh. So I guess for everyone hating on Jagmeet Singh in that interview, which certainly has been all of Twitter the past few days, I guess that's my fault. In all seriousness, though, how would the NDP combat something like these tariffs that we're seeing? You're seeing it brought up a lot in the Ontario election. It was the reason for the call, Doug Ford's message to protect Ontario. Marit has been kind of insistent, though, on making the campaign about healthcare, education. How do they kind of ensure Ontarians that they do have a strong plan to deal with something that's obviously front and center for most right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Premier Marit Stiles and the New Democrats are looking to tariff-proof Ontario, so it isn't just about today and this current latest spat with the current president, but it is about those longer-term issues about healthcare, education, community building, transit, infrastructure, making sure that people have homes. And we're not seeing encampment after community after community. Those are the kinds of things when you look at these global issues, what can we do locally, but also looking at that buying power of Ontario, looking at the broader conversation about the extraordinary workers we have here in Ontario. Marit was out with the United Steelworkers just yesterday talking about tariffs. And what would be the impact? What do we need to do to tariff-proof Ontario? And certainly why Marit Stiles is the person to be premier.
And I had a Liberal strategist on just last segment who was praising Doug Ford, was calling him, like, taking kind of the Team Canada approach and pointing that out. It seemed almost as if they were aligned, if not fully supportive of some of the decisions that the Ford government has been making with respect to these tariffs. Doug Ford has obviously been in Washington these past few days. Would the NDP align themselves with the approach of this government from your perspective on the tariffs the same way the Liberals seem to be doing right now?
Look, I think it's important that you don't put pit one industry against another, one set of workers against another. You find those common ground in the unity. But I'm not surprised when Liberal strategists start praising Doug Ford. I mean, they started doing that in the 2018 campaign, saying Doug Ford is our guy. Vote for him, and that hasn't wavered all the way through. I mean, we just saw Bonnie Crombie, the current Liberal leader, talk about how she's a different kind of Liberal, having pure praise her housing policy. look, I want to talk about community building. I want to talk about what Marit Stiles is bringing forward, and really that's about community and how do you build those communities going forward. And that's an important distinction. It's really a values conversation.
And putting on your observer cap for a moment here, the Conservatives federally are embracing a very similar tone, very similar rhetoric to kind of what Donald Trump did over the course of his campaign. Pierre Poilievre now is saying Canada first. I said this in an earlier segment in the same way Donald Trump was using kind of the America first messaging over the course of his campaign. So how might a Conservative government, not just provincially, assuming that Doug Ford gets reelected on February 27th, but federally,
I make
given
no
the
such assumptions, Wyatt.
given that the Conservatives are likely to get elected federally as well, not to make another assumption, but that's what the polls are suggesting. How might the two of them kind of respectively deal with this?
Look, I think we're seeing things like Buy Ontario, Buy Canada policies that Jagmeet Singh and Marit Stiles have both brought forward. But it has to be more than just as Pierre Poilievre likes to verb the noun, so to speak, right? We've seen this over the last little while, these sloganeering bumper stickers, cosplay moments, really. And it really is about values, ideas that you're bringing forward, and bringing people with you along in community after community. So those are the kinds of things I look to both as an outside observer and as a political strategist.
All right, we will leave it there. Kim Wright, NDP strategist, thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this edition of Forum Focus. I must say, I really enjoy the balance of conversation that we had in this episode, in particular, hearing from all sides of the political spectrum about what they would like to see, not just federally, but provincially as well, as, of course, we're in an election in Ontario. We have a number of other provincial campaigns coming up as well. So I want to thank you for joining the conversation. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to follow us for more insights, analysis, and thought-provoking dialogue. Stay engaged, stay informed, and we'll see you next time right here on Forum Focus. Thank you.